The culture and history of the Ojibwe reservations. The United States treated the Ojibwe of Upper Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota as a single tribe. Since their land was useless agriculturally, there was little pressure for land cessions. In 1820, a small area near Sault Ste. Marie and the St. Martin Islands were ceded in 2 treaties. After mining the shores of Lake Superior, the United States discovered rich copper and timber deposits. In 1842, Ojibwe ceded most of the Upper Michigan and northern Wisconsin areas, retaining their right to fish and hunt only. The United States paid $75,000 and an annuity of $36,000 for 25 years as compensation. President Zachary Taylor ordered the removal of the northern Ojibwe, but died before his act could occur. In 1854, President Millard Fillmore rescinded this act and instead assigned them 6 small reservations in Minnesota. The Plains Ojibwe often left on extended buffalo hunts, so the United States deemed their reservation too big for them and rescinded 90% of their land. In 1884, stranded without land, the Plains Ojibwe accepted the 10-cent treaty, offering 10 cents for every acre of the 10 million they lost. They settled in North Dakota, and in 1886, the Rocky Boy Ojibwe arrived in Montana. The people of Montana accepted them and gave them the Rocky Boy Reservation.
The Ojibwe were extremely superstitious, even more so than the other surrounding tribes. The ancestors of the later Ojibwe imagined that the country which they had wrested from the conquered Sacs was haunted by the spirits of those whom they had slain, and that it was only after the lapse of years that their terrors became allayed sufficiently to permit them to occupy the haunted hunting grounds. But the superstition still remained, and in fact it was never entirely dispelled. The Ojibwe have another interesting belief in that they viewed the world in 2 genders, animate and inanimate, rather than male and female. As an animate, a person could serve the society as a male role or a female role. Anthropologists have documented that the Ojibwe peoples do not live according to the European ideas of gender and its roles. Other Ojibwe cultural traditions have prevailed despite being confined to reservations. Traditional summer powwows continue to take place to this day. Many of the Ojibwe take part in Sundance ceremonies at these gatherings. Many people still follow the traditional ways of harvesting wild rice, picking berries, hunting, making medicines, and making maple sugar.
Women and children were vital members to the Ojibwe community while on the reservations. They were expected to uphold the traditions of the Ojibwe, even when pressured by the outside world. The women were expected to work alongside and help their husbands. On the Ojibwe reservations, it was very rare for people to marry out of love. Normally, marriage was done as a necessity for survival. Children on the reservation were forced to grow up fast. At very young ages, they were expected to help their families with all the daily chores. Many children were even forced to go to boarding schools by the government at the time, but they were expected to come back to the reservations and still uphold the traditions of the Ojibwe. The Ojibwe culture in many ways has been harmed by the influence of the Westerners. The Western ideas have really caused people to overlook the importance of the women and children in that culture. The Ojibwe family was a team that worked together to keep the reservations running and to keep the traditions of their ancestors. The Ojibwe drum was a very important part of the Ojibwe culture on the reservations. The image of the drum can be seen everywhere, from the creation story to stories of healings and even stories of death. The creation story of the Ojibwe was said to have started with the sounding of a drum. The drum was the first sound that was heard at the start of creation and occurred all throughout the process. Even Mother Earth was woken up by the sound of the Ojibwe drum. By looking at its use in the creation tales of the Ojibwe, we can get a good look as to how important this drum really was to these people. The drum was a separate living being and had a spirit of its own. It had to be created in specific ways and was to be treated with the utmost respect. The natives assembled it and decorated it with paintings that were revealed to them in their dreams. The drum was the center of many ceremonies and festivities on the reservations. All the natives would gather around it, sing songs, and chant their tribal chants. The spirit of the drum was even known to have been capable of healings. On the Ojibwe reservations, the drum was the center of the Ojibwe culture and was a vital part of the traditions that the Ojibwe are trying to keep alive. As the name of the novel implies, the Ojibwe drum can be seen all throughout the novel. This first quote refers to the time when its powers of safety and healing are revealed. Ira's children were in danger, but the powers of the drum led them to safety. It can also be seen later in Bernard's note to Faye when he talks about it being in regular use. They were now using it at their powwows that they were holding on the reservation and for other tribal events. He says that it changed the feeling of the reservation just by being present. The spiritual beliefs of the Ojibwe can also be seen in this novel. This is just one example we see where a character is in conversation with the spirits of the dead. Later in this same conversation, Anaquat mentions that she had talked to her deceased daughter's spirit before. This wasn't a one-time occurrence. It was something that had happened several times before.